What's up, everyone? This is Josh Rubin, and Jeannie Rubin will not be here today. She has other duties that she had to take care of, but she will be back here next week. This is Josh Rubin from East West Healing, and this is Conscious Nutrition, episode number 16. I can't believe it's number 16 already. It's crazy. Seems like a lot. It's really not, but it is a lot. And today we're going to talk about the Histamine Diet. Not the diet itself, literally, but more about histamine, what it is, the response, and kind of like the illusion that's being created with the Histamine Diet, of course, right? We're always looking at that aspect of it and correlating it back to our approach. Why not? That's our focus for today. If you're watching this, thank you very much. I'll get into that in a little bit. Kind of went off on a little tangent there. I want to take care of a few logistical things first before we go into talking about the Histamine Diet. The first is we have a free complimentary audio series. It's called the Restoration Diet Audio Series. And it's complimentary. It's a 7-part audio series on how to heal your adrenals and thyroid, aka metabolism, with food. So I'm going to put that link in the comment section, and you can click that link and you can subscribe so you can download that 7-part audio series. It's wonderful. Of course, we're biased, but we do get a lot of feedback on it, and it's a great place to start. If you want to get the ball rolling for that healing process, or if you want to learn more about who we are and what we do, where we're coming from, it's a great introductory to our work. So definitely download that now. Secondly, we offer a free complimentary session. It's 15 minutes, a chance, number one, to ask us questions, and it's a chance for us to build a little bit of a relationship, and it's a chance for us to answer some of your questions, kind of fill you in on our approach and how we go about certain things. So I'm going to put that link in the comment section as well, and you can click on that. So if you're watching this video, I'd like to ask two things. What's up, Genevieve? Number one is, please share this. There's a lot of people out there that could benefit from our work, as well as others, of course, but we do this so we can get this out to the masses and share our philosophy. So, of course, most people need a little bit of help, whether it's with us or not. At least it can create a different way of thinking. So share this with people. If you're watching this now or later, please like it. And if you have any questions throughout the video today, or even on the watch back, please post your comments below so we can answer those comments within a short amount of time. Don't forget, this is episode 16. So episode 1 through 15, all of them are in the videos tab. If you're looking at your computer under our East West Healing page, on the left-hand side there's a videos tab. If you click on that, it'll take you to all the videos, and we have a playlist. It'll have every single episode from 1 to up until this point. So you can definitely watch those. They're also on our YouTube page as well, East West Healing. So that gets rid of a lot of the logistical, things. So let's kind of get into it. And of course, if you have questions about what I'm talking about or want to share your experience, go for it. We definitely want that. We want people to, feel like they can kind of speak up. Don't worry about interrupting me. So here's the thing with the Histamine Diet, or just histamine. We have to ask ourselves, is it really the food we're eating, or is it our body being in an inflamed state reacting to more stressors that are being placed on it? Because the body is already under a lot of stress, right? It's two different things. And I think if we really think about it and break it down physiologically, it's the latter. Our body is in an inflamed state. And the things we start to eat and do start to create even more inflammation because we're less resilient, right? And the problem is that these diseases are being these diets are being created in a sense based off diseases of adaptation. And that's what the Histamine Diet is. It's an adaptation to who you are, how you're living, your history, what you eat, what you don't eat, your emotional stress, etc. All those things add up, and they cause different reactions in the body. And I know a lot of people think, well, food's the problem. If I just regulate my food, I'm going to heal. I don't believe that. What I do believe is if you regulate based on the diet, you will reduce some inflammation, but you will maintain where you are physiologically and really never get past that. So you truly don't heal. You just eliminate maybe some of the symptoms. And that doesn't mean health, right? The absence of a symptom doesn't mean health. So now, of course, sometimes food can be the problem. We'll get into that. A lot of people that we work with and they come to us, or they even just call us, most people are eating highly undigestible foods, whether it's processed foods and packaged foods, whether it's grains, whether it's a diet high in legumes, tofu, raw leafy greens, a diet high in leafy greens, right? All these foods are highly undigestible. And it's really that unbalanced diet that's leading to these new age diets for diseases of adaptation like SIBO and the histamine diet, because this wasn't around 10, 20, 40, 30, 50 years ago. Why? Right? Because our society and as a culture, we're doing more. We're under more stress because we never stop. We never stop because of technology. So those stresses are always there, right? Think about it. If you can, when you were younger, most of you watching, right, you would leave work, you'd go home. You wouldn't have a computer at home. Or if you had a computer at home and you went outside playing with your kids, you wouldn't have the ability to check your email to get stressed because your boss was emailing you or texting you, right? So we're constantly going. We never have that chance to actually slow down. So, it's like I was telling a client the other day, she's like, how did I get adrenal fatigue? And all these different things. And I was saying, well, a lot of people focus on the adrenals, and that's not the problem. The problem is how you're living, everything you've been doing for the past 20, 30, 40 years, how you're eating, etc., that's causing stress on the adrenals, right? Everything added up causing stress to the system physiologically, and that acute stress becoming chronic. And then exactly is what the histamine diet or the histamine response is. It's an acute to a chronic buildup where we have an intolerance to histamine itself, right? And I'll get, at the end, it's going to be quite enlightening because most of the foods that are on the histamine diet, well, I'll get to it and it'll make sense at the end. Now, when we talk about, yeah, it is true, Raquel. I think a lot of people don't look at that, and that's what we're really trying to teach people is, yes, you have SIBO. Yes, you have a candida overgrowth or adrenal fatigue or whatever these things are, that we're making up to create the illusion that there's actually something wrong with us. So we don't have to focus on actually creating new habits, changing who we are, and changing how we're living, right? I was talking to two chiropractors the other day, two different people, same story. I own my own business. I work all the time. I never take a day off. I work from 8 in the morning until 6 at night. I never have time to eat. I have adrenal fatigue. How can I fix it? I've tried everything. You are going to have to try everything and anything, and it's never going to work. Because you have to change how you're living. You have to change how your habits are throughout the day. You have to create a healthy living environment so you can heal. Because that's what's causing the adrenal issues, the SIBO, etc. Right? Same thing with histamine. We have to look at what's causing that immune system reaction, right? Of course, there's many things, but 99% of the time, the one thing that's going to set it off is stress. Because stress is the perceived need for sugar. Wrap your head around that one. Because when we are stressed, we need more energy. That energy is sugar. Sugar. Hold on a second, I gotta plug my phone in. If we don't have that, we go into the stress response and et cetera, et cetera. So that acute issue becomes super chronic over time. But when we go into that state and we don't have those needs, we create severe blood sugar handling issues. And through that and the hormones being released, that creates an immune compromised state. When we're in an immune compromised state, you get SIBO, you get a candida overgrowth, you get the histamine reaction, and you have to go on the histamine diet. No, you don't. So let's talk about it a little bit. Hi, Leslie from the UK. Welcome. Thank you for tuning in, and glad you're liking our work, and thank you for supporting us. So, of course, most people that have it, they complain of like rashes or runny nose or migraines, sleep issues, digestive issues, blood pressure issues, etc. But we can't really correlate that to a histamine issue because that could be the issue of many, many different things, right? But those are the most, I'd say, common symptoms people have. So let's talk about like what histamine is, because I think with us, the biggest thing is understanding. If we understand, we can feel and then we can heal, right? And that's really important. Instead of just really using a method, we're really trying to teach a principle. This is how the body works. This is what histamine is. And if we understand histamine, then it all makes sense in the end. And that's really what it comes down to. Hi, Clea. Thank you. Okay, so histamine is a chemical. It's naturally produced in the body, playing an important role in the inflammatory response. And I always say this because people always say like proteins are so bad for us or animals are so bad for us. Well, you wouldn't have hydrochloric acid in your stomach if it was. Yes, hydrochloric acid is part of your immune system, but realize this, if you don't eat protein, you produce less and less hydrochloric acid. Your body adapts. This is why most vegetarians have GERD, which is hypochlorhydria. It's because they don't have enough, right? So that's a sign that we need protein. We use hydrochloric acid to break down protein, right? So what I'm really getting at is this. You wouldn't produce histamine if it was bad for you. It's actually used for many different reasons, right? So I'm going to read this to you because it's much easier than just kind of remembering it. Histamine is an organic nitrogenous compound involved in the immune response, right? So we already know there's, hey, what's up, Chantal from Montreal, that it is part of the immune system and it's responding to something, which is inflammation. It's regulating physiological function in the gut. It acts as a neurotransmitter in the brain, the spinal cord, and the uterus. So it has a functional point in the body, just like candida does. We live with candida in our body. It's when we live out of balance that it overgrows. Same thing with histamine, right? So it's always the environment. That's why I always tell people, don't blame dairy, don't blame sugar, don't blame histamine. It's always the body we're putting it into. It's the physiology, it's the state of our being that's creating the dysfunction of what we're putting in our body, or from what we're putting in our body. And the biggest source of histamine in the body is our gut flora, right? So if you think about that from a hypoglycemic point of view, from a thyroid point of view, because your thyroid has a huge influence on the gut flora, right? Because let's just go off on a little bit of tangent. If you're in a heightened stress sympathetic state, which you are when you're releasing histamine, I'll get to that in a second, and I'll just show you scientifically how that happens. What happens? We could say you're running from a lion. We could say you're doing the Boston Marathon or the New York Marathon. So physiologically, you're in a heightened state. You're on the go. The pumps are primed, and you're heightened, right? You're running. And physiologically, you're doing that even if you're at rest in the sympathetic state. This is why most people are tired all the time, or they have adrenal fatigue, because physiologically, they're running a marathon when they're sitting still. When you're in this state, what happens? The body says, well, I need to run, so I need more blood and nourishment for the extremities, for the eyes, for the brain, etc. That's the most important thing. So a lot of energy is taken away from the organs, like the digestive system, right? Because when we digest food, we need a lot of energy. That's why we need to be more of in a rejuvenative, regenerative, like rest state to digest food. So when we're running a marathon, we're not thinking about digesting food. We're not thinking about pooping. We're not thinking about procreating. Think about that. So a lot of our digestive juices slow down. Hydrochloric acid kind of comes down a little bit. Pancreatic enzymes slow down. Peristalsis slows down, right? And if we're in that state all the time, we're eating all these undigestible foods, what happens? Not only do we get SIBO, but our gut flora starts to change. Why? Number one, we can't break down these foods. They're moving slowly through the system, and they're fermenting, right? And they're putrefying. But number two, because thyroid regulates the gut flora, has a huge influence on the gut flora, right? And has a huge influence on autonomic nervous system balance. So it makes sense when people have histamines, right? It's telling us about their body. It's telling us about the state of their being and who they are from an autonomic nervous system perspective, not just a histamine. We have to take off our blinders. We can't just look at everything like this and say, oh, it's a histamine issue, it's candida, it's SIBO, it's fibromyalgia, and just try to kill everything with an axe. We have to start opening everything up and look more widely at how we're living our life, what is going on, and am I living a life that's supporting health? And I can tell you that 99% of the time, most people aren't. Why? Well, we're seeing these things become more and more and more prevalent, right? Not only on the web, but with people on forums and all. Why are we talking about it, right? It's very prevalent. What's up, Darlene? Another interesting note, and this is where I'll get into kind of what stimulates it. Histamine's produced by basal, this is a little technical, I know, basophils and mast cells, which are part of the immune system. And it's normally used in a functional state to dilate the blood vessels. So the increased blood flow, and immune cells can get to specific areas that need it to repair damage when there's some inflammation or fight off pathogens. So this is our adaptation state. We go into it, we come back, right? That is normalcy. That is resiliency. That is what we should do, right? So if you try to like really eliminate histamines, in a sense, you put yourself at a much more susceptible state to not being able to fight inflammation or repair damage. And that can be very dangerous. So here's the thing. When we think about it from the ground up, right, we think about two things. We think about ventilation, or I should say ventilation from the nose, because we should breathe through our nose. So think about this. When you go for a jog or you exercise extensively and you do something sympathetic, how are you breathing? Most people breathe through their mouth. So if you're at rest, drinking coffee, talking to someone, or listening to someone, you're standing in line at your desk, whatever, and your mouth is open, think about what that says about your physiology. As everyone just went, right? We should normally breathe through our nose. The nose is meant for breathing. That's a whole nother topic. But it's been shown through research that low levels of CO2 in the body can cause chemical changes in the mast cells, stimulating the release of histamine. Think about that. So what happens is this. What we're trying to do is regulate how our cells breathe through blood sugar regulation, glucose, of course, and thyroid hormone, as well as getting people to breathe properly at the ventilation level so they can actually not blow off too much CO2, because CO2 is the issue here. It's not oxygen, right? The less CO2 we blow off, and when we mouth breathe, we blow off a lot of CO2. The less oxygen we have bioavailable to the brain, the tissues, the lungs, etc. When we breathe through the nose, we filter, warm, and humidify the air. We don't blow off as much CO2. Now we can use that CO2 to access oxygen, because it takes it away from hemoglobin. Oxygen is attached to hemoglobin, and it detaches it. It decreases that strength of the bond. So what happens next? We can use that oxygen in our cells with the foods that we eat, the sugar that we're storing, etc., to produce energy, which is CO2. So what happens, that CO2 as well keeps oxygen filtering through the process, and it keeps us in a much more metabolic, non-inflammatory state. So think about it. When we're not breathing correctly at the cell level, right, we're producing lactic acid. This means that most people are mouth breathing. So when you're mouth breathing, when you're in a heightened state, a sympathetic state, your body temperature is less than 97.8, your pulse is really low, your pulse is really high, right? These are somewhat indicators. We have cold hands and feet. We have trouble sleeping. We have anxiety. There's many different things. But the bottom line is this. We know that CO2 is not being produced. And this is seen through body temperature and pulse. That's why I said that. So what happens? Well, low levels of CO2 trigger hyperventilation, which triggers anxiety. Interesting, right? That stimulates your nerve cells. That increases muscle tension. That primes the body for action. Perception is heightened. The whole body is in a heightened state. Your pain threshold is lowered, and adrenaline is released into the body. What is that? That is the stress state. So whether it's coming from ventilation or the cell level, now you're in a sympathetic state. What is happening in that sympathetic state? Like I said, now you're releasing histamine. So the issue is not the histamine. The issue is the state of your being. It's the state of who you are. It's your autonomic nervous system in the heightened state of your sympathetic, because you're hyperventilating at this level. You're breathing through your mouth all the time, not your nose, even when you sleep, and you're blowing off too much CO2, and you're not eating and living in a way to support the production of CO2 at the cellular level. We call that cellular respiration, right? What's up, Ryan? So it's really important to understand that, because this is where it's all coming from. You don't need the histamine diet, right? That's an illusion that we create to say, I don't need to change. We want you to change, and that's why we're talking about this. So when we're constantly in an inflamed state, and we continually live in an inflamed way, and we eat these inflammatory foods that I mentioned, what happens? We keep pushing our nervous system in this direction where the parasympathetic just kind of goes down and down and down. Our vagal tone decreases, and we live in that sympathetic state. We're running from a lion, and we're running a marathon every single day. We are causing inflammation even when we're sitting at our desk. Crazy, right? So histamine just keeps building and building and building up in the body, and it builds up in the bloodstream. And this is why people think they need the histamine diet. Bye. I could leave now. That's all you need to know, right? It's pretty crazy. If you really rewind it and think about all the things I just said, and you connect some of the dots, it's pretty powerful, because we went from looking at histamine to taking off the blinders, looking deeper into the body, understanding who we are and how we're living and how it affects our body from a functional standpoint, and how we don't need the histamine diet. We just need to change how we're living. I'll address some of the questions that are coming up right now. I know in your head you're like, well, why? What? I need this right now, because when I have these foods, it causes a reaction. The problem is everyone is focusing so much on food, and they're not focusing on the more important pieces in their life. Now, I'm not saying food isn't the issue, right? But you have to look at where you came from, right? What are your traumas in your life? What are your stressors? Were you in any accidents, surgeries, etc., right? What is your stress in the past? What is your stress What is your stress like right now? All those things shape your nervous system. And if you think by just eating the histamine diet, you're going to heal, right? You can manage your symptoms, but if you think you're going to heal, it's not going to happen, right? Because you have to look at where you came from and change. You have to change to create change. It's that simple. You have to begin strengthening your nervous system. And we do that with food, and we do that with breathing. We do that with teaching people just to breathe through their nose. Access their diaphragm, and then use breathing to change things physiologically. We do that with our food. with metabolic foods, food frequency, etc., so we can regulate our blood sugar, to reteach the liver how to store glycogen so we can upregulate energy production at the cell level. By doing that, we're pushing our body this way, and we're quieting down the excitement of the sympathetic state. Now, I'm not saying some people don't need other work. Of course they do, right? But a lot of the times food and breathing are an easy gateway into that, right? Does anyone have any questions at this point? Because we're covering a lot, and it's a lot to take in. You might have to watch it again. But if you to really summarize it, it's not histamine that's a problem, because we produce it naturally in the body. The stress could be coming from anywhere. It could be coming from undigestible foods. It could be coming from how we live, traumas, etc. All these things affect energy production at the cell level, which affect how we breathe at the ventilation level. These two things together, when they become unbalanced, affect the level of CO2 in our body. When CO2 drops, we hyperventilate even more, right? But that stimulates the production of histamine by the mast cells. Why? Because now we are in a sympathetic, heightened inflammatory state. Kelly has a question. How much of time should we be breathing deeply for shallow? You shouldn't be breathing deeply. It's not about breathing more, actually. It's about breathing less. So if you want to learn more about that, you can check out our Instagram page or Facebook page. It's called metabolic_breathing. And you can learn more a little bit about that. But the bottom line is this. Most people don't know how to use their nose to breathe. So the first step is don't worry about doing crazy breath work. Don't worry about doing crazy holds. Don't worry about trying to slow down your breath. Just breathe through your nose. Because for a lot of people, that is challenging. Does strapping your mouth shut at night work? That's maybe down the line, because I find if people begin to create awareness with breathing during the day, eventually you'll adapt and breathe through your nose at night. Some people do need to tape their mouth, but it's not something I've ever used with clients. Now, of course, there's many camps out there. You have the one camp that says, eliminate these foods. We're going to imprison you. You can't eat anything except you can drink water because you won't have a histamine reaction. But some of you will, right? So there's that one camp that says, let's take out everything that's causing inflammation and just keep you where you're at. Let's not move you forward. Let's just maintain you, right? That's the one camp that's out there. There's another camp, which is even more crazy to me. And that camp says, well, if you are having a histamine reaction, right, then let's take an antihistamine. Really? Talk about lazy. Talk about not really honoring what the body can do and what histamine reaction is in our body, and really understanding the function of histamine and what our body can do, or having trust and belief that we can heal. Number one, taking antihistamines like Benadryl, of course, they can be even more inflammatory. But what I've seen is they're highly addictive. So what happens is, I've worked with people for this. They take it because certain people told them to take it because they think they have a histamine reaction. And they become addicted to it because now when they don't take it, they can't sleep. That's even a bigger problem. Because when they stop taking it, next thing you know, they can't sleep. They can't sleep, take naps. They can't sleep at night. They're super tired but wired. And now we have a person that's not sleeping, which becomes even more of a stress. Right? So those are things that we do not recommend, either one of those camps. Eliminating all the foods or taking antihistamines, right? Before I get into our approach, there's a question by Britt. Thank you for bringing this up. I struggled with awful symptoms that doctors couldn't figure out for 3 years. I realized it was histamine issue, taking natural antihistamine. Naturally. Yeah, so, the bottom line is this. Every single person that is in a stress state that doesn't feel good has elevated histamine. It's that simple. It's part of your immune system. But the more chronic it gets, it's going to show up more and more and more, right? So we know that if we're in that place, that acute stress when we're 17 or 5 or 21 is now so chronic, right? So it's like that little ball is now a gigantic ball of stress physiologically on my system. And I have to begin to look at how I'm living and how I'm breathing and create new habits, right? And create new rhythms to help my body heal along with nutrition, and not just focus on food and think it's the only thing that's going to work without making any other changes in my life. Kelly says, I take them really and it seems to work to reset things. Yeah, it might feel that way, but if you still have to take them, it's not resetting anything. You just maybe pushing it back a little and it's coming back up because you haven't changed anything. You know, so from my point of view, it's not something that you want to take. Now, you know, everyone lives a different way. We don't take things like that. We just don't feel the need. It's your body telling you something. And you just have to listen to it and understand it and respond to it. And like I said, it's hard. People have children, people have jobs, people don't have time, they say. You have to make time. If healing and health is your priority, you have to make time. You have to. That's the only way you're going to heal. If you've tried everything, but you haven't changed how you're living, or any of those things, or creating new habits, it's never going to work. Of course it's not going to work. Chantel asks, how should we breathe when exercising? Honestly, if we're talking about people that are truly have high histamine levels, through your nose. You should let your breathing dictate the intensity of your exercise. So you should only move or jog or exercise to the degree that you can breathe through your nose. And that is very slow or very rhythmic, and you're probably going to have to take a lot more rest to slow your breathing down and breathe through your nose, right? So you have to let your breathing dictate your the intensity of what you're doing. Britt says, I was in a horrible car accident when I was 17 and inherently type A, but have made many lifestyle changes. Good. That's what it's all about, you know? I always say you have to change to create change. It's not just about food. And that's why a lot of people say, well, I've tried everything and nothing has worked. Exactly. That's a red flag. Just because you work with me doesn't mean you're going to get better. You have to change. Okay, enough about that, because I could talk about that for eons, right? I posted this on Instagram the other day. 99% of people want to change. Only 1% are really going to change. Everyone wants to change. Everyone wants to get better. But a lot of people are afraid to change. It's scary, right? So the other camp is us. Okay? And I don't know anyone else there that's doing this. So I'd say we are the camp. The first thing is you have to rebuild your foundation. And that foundation is everything I just talked about, how you're living, right? If you're working from 8 to 6 with no breaks, when are you going to take a break? If you say you can't, then you just don't want to heal. It's that simple, right? You have to change. When are you going to take breaks? When are you going to take a nap? When are you going to find time for you to resource yourself throughout the day or at night? When are you going to take the time to think about how your food's working for you or against you? When are you going to take the time to think about how your day is working for you or against you, or your exercise? And when are you going to take the time to move if you're not moving? That's simple. You have to rebuild your foundation with that, but also with metabolic foods, which I'll get into. Now, I know some people will say, well, if I eat these foods, they cause a histamine reaction. Yes, sometimes initially, while you're changing your life and creating new habits and you're altering your nutrition, you have to kind of keep out those foods until you start rebuilding your foundation. You get it stronger. You're regulating your blood sugar. You're increasing your immunity, right? You're increasing energy production and increasing carbon dioxide. What happens we stop overproducing histamine, the body can clear it, and over time you can add in those offending foods. But a lot of the times, most foods people are eating, like I said, are undigestible, which is leading to the altered gut flora and the inflammation itself. So some of those foods we do want to leave out forever, right, because they're so highly undigestible. And the interesting part about all this is this: metabolic foods and the foods that we teach people to eat are all low in histamine. Not on purpose. Why? Because metabolic foods are digestible by the human body. They provide the body with minerals, nutrients, and vitamins, and they work with the system. It's that simple, right? We're talking about, number one, make sure you eat fresh foods. Try to stay away from leftovers because, of course, that can increase the histamine content with certain foods. But we want to eat foods like fresh meats and fish and eggs and dairy and shellfish and broth and fruits. These are the foods that we teach people to eat on a daily basis. These are non-inflammatory, metabolic, pro-thyroid, parasympathetic, supportive foods. These are the foods that these are the foods that the histamine diet typically recommends. Interesting, huh? I find it really interesting. And we want to eliminate the non-digestible foods that can easily contribute to inflammation, altered gut flora, and elevated histamine levels in the body, such as grains, raw vegetables, overeating vegetables, legumes, beans, gluten, alcohol, dried food, all fermented foods. And people are probably going nuts right now, but these are the offending foods. These are the foods that are going to lead to the histamine or contribute to elevated histamine in the body. You know, it's like how you're living and all those things, plus these foods that most people are eating. And that's why, because everyone thinks just because a vegetable looks beautiful that we should overeat it. Or just because a bean is a bean, when you cook it, it's so healthy, it's vegan, that we should eat it. It doesn't work like that. It's very undigestible to the system. So there's a couple questions I want to get to them. Your diet plan definitely helped me, but you're right with how I was running my body apart. My issue was in my head and overthinking too much, and I was not my body enough. I'm working on social engagement. Tiffany, congratulations. Good job. Leslie, I only eat fish. How often do you suggest per week? I don't know. I don't know enough about you or what you're doing. If you only eat fish, then you probably have to eat fish at every meal. It's that simple if you only eat fish. But if you're only eating fish and you don't eat carbs, then that's going to be a problem, right? Because you're not going to be able to produce carbon dioxide, right? Stress is the perceived need for sugar. We don't have sugar, we create the stress reaction. We store blood sugar, we convert thyroid hormone, we produce energy at the cell level, we regulate the stress reaction. So think about it. Naturally, from understanding how the body works, understanding the function of the body, we've come to the conclusion, from a functional standpoint, these are the foods that the body needs. So we don't have to tackle SIBO. We don't have to tackle histamine. We don't have to tackle all these different things. We're giving the body what it needs, and the body will do the rest, which is create health. That's what it's designed to do. We're not chasing symptoms. We're creating health. But I can tell you this, if you think that you're just going to eat these healthy foods and heal, it might help you a little bit, if not a lot, but you still at some point have to change, especially if there are things in your life like lack of sleep or never taking time out, etc., that are having that inflammatory response in your system. So I want to open up for a couple questions. We went a little bit over, which is fine. But I've just gone it through a lot in regards to our approach with the histamine diet and why I feel the diet itself is not really worth it, and what you can do to really benefit yourself to really truly regulating your physiology so you don't maintain where you are, so you can truly heal and grow and get over this and not feel so imprisoned your entire life. So I want to open it up for a couple questions and then I want to wrap it up. Any questions? If you're watching this and you have questions on the playback, post your questions below, and we will definitely get to them in the next 24 to probably like 48 hours or so. Don't forget, we are here every single Thursday at 12 p.m. Pacific Coast time. We will be here next Thursday. Actually, we will have a guest on next Thursday, believe it or not. So strap your shoes on tight. It's a doozy. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Leslie. Don't forget, as always, if you want to watch this on the playback, it'll be on our Facebook page, but it'll also be on the videos section of our Facebook page as well as our YouTube. So thank you for everyone's support. Thank you for taking time out of your day. I will see you guys, and Jeannie will be here next Thursday. We will see you next Thursday at 12 p.m. Pacific Coast time. Peace.